Very good. Thank you very much for joining us. We continue with our conversation here. For the last 1 hour or so, we've been discussing about the Kenyan economy and where are we, what needs to be done, who needs to do what. And you have heard it from the team that we were having in the studio. Time now to focus on something different, the extractive industry. It is estimated that the contribution of the extractive industry is about 1% to Kenya's GDP. The Vision 2030 talks about expanding this to about 10% by the year 2030. And so you're talking about how many years from now? About 7 years. And so we need to ramp up our efforts in trying to encourage more investment in the extractive industry and, of course, ensure that we tap more investors to come into the Kenyan market. Because the biggest investor in this industry so far has been the Kwale Mineral Sands, which is owned by Base Titanium, that has an investment of about $600 million. So that's about 60 billion Kenya shillings. And we can do more. That's the fact of the matter, because Kenya is hugely endowed with the natural resources. You're talking about oil in northern Kenya, gold in western Kenya, and of course Nyanza region. You're also talking about rare earth minerals in Taita Taveta, and what else? We are talking about gas and oil off the coast of Lamu, some areas in Samburu. And so we have a lot of resources. The question is, what do we need to do to exploit these resources to the benefit of the local communities, as well as to the benefit of the Kenyan economy? Mwedia Nyaga is the CEO of Oil and Energies. He's joining us this morning, as well as Stephen Mwakesi. He's also a public policy analyst, and as well as the CEO of Extractives Insight Center. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. And I want first of all to hear from Mwedia Nyaga. Where are we in terms of extractive industry in Kenya?
Thank you very much, Brian. Happy to be with you here again. I would say the extractive industry, and perhaps talking about more on the oil sector, which is where I'm perhaps much more versed, and my friend Steve is more versed in the mining side. We're somewhat in a lull right now, but I would say that I could call these maybe the calm before the storm, or something like that. And our industry tends to go like that, where you see sometimes a lot of activities, especially when you're still exploring, like what we are doing here in Kenya. Yeah. When people carry out exploration works, they sometimes need to go back and review what they found and then plan what to do next. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes years to just do that, to review what has happened, what are the results we got, and then plan what to do next. That's where Kenya, our country, is in right now. There has been, there was a lot of drilling in Turkana, you have mentioned it, that happened over quite a period of time. Then that seems to have stopped around 2018. Yeah. After that, there has been drilling offshore, offshore Lamu, that is never noticed by people as much as what they can notice when activity is on land. And that drilling happened, I believe, in 2020. And these companies are reviewing what they found, and we are hoping that they'll come back with bigger plans of perhaps developing what they found and bringing some of that on top of the ground surface and take it to market.
How long would that take, for example?
I would say like in the case of Turkana, it's probably closer than the case of offshore, because the case of Turkana is where oil has been discovered. And not only has it been discovered, but a lot of work was done in evaluating how much is it, how much can be produced, what kind of facilities need to be constructed to produce that oil and take it to the market. All this has been done. In fact, as we start right now, I believe that there's a development plan, a final version now on the table of the government, which if the government could approve that, then these companies could be planning now going to the next phase. So it's something which, if it can be accelerated, we could see change in 12 to 18 months.
I'll be coming back to you so that you can give us a sneak preview of what is contained in that proposal. But adding now on to Mwakesi, I mean, you have been the previous CEO of the Kenya Chambers of Mines. We know there is gold in this country in the areas around Nyanza, Migori, Kakamega. All this has been known for many years. There is rare earth minerals which are becoming a hot topic, at the global stage, with China and the US querying it of these rare minerals. We also do understand there are other minerals that we can exploit in this country to benefit ourselves. How comes in the last 20-25 years, the only minerals that we have managed to exploit commercially is just titanium?
Well, thank you, Brian. Happy New Year. I haven't been here for quite a while. So, yes, as you've rightly mentioned, extractives in general is a large term that encompasses both mining, and these are the solid minerals where you talk about titanium, gold, and these other types of minerals, and then oil and gas, which now is more concerned with mafuta, the petroleum and things like, and gas which you use for LPG and natural gas. The Kenyan mining sector is one of the oldest. In fact, we are older than oil and gas. Kenyans have been mining gold and other sorts of minerals for quite a long time. In fact, our Base Act was devised in 1940, prior to independence of Kenya. And that tells you how far back we go in terms of commercial mining of these minerals. And we saw activity in Kakamega, around the Kakamega forest, Makalda mines, Kolomani, as they used to call it. And over time, and then we had the Magadi Soda project that was something that was being done, and Kenya Fluorspar, which is also another project that started off as a government project, eventually went into private hands, and we were a vibrant mining economy back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. But then there came the global slump of demand for most of these commodities, and mining got restructured. It wasn't as it was before. A lot of investment money went to regions where gold was found in, let's say, a lot of abundance that we had in Kenya, because we had not invested very much in carrying out studies to find out where these particular minerals are, and carrying out significant investment in it to now companies to come in. But we had a renaissance moment around 2010 to 2013, when suddenly a lot more investment money started flowing into the country. And by around the year 2012, when we were just going into the elections, we signed off on our first mineral agreement for the Titanium Sands project in Kwale. And O'Brien, since that moment, and it was $600 million investment, it was the largest at the time in the country. There was nothing as big as that. What happened is that we saw the country completely shift in how it was looked at in the global map. We became a large exporter of minerals in the country. And this has benefited the country for quite a while. The people of Kwale right now are receiving a check of almost 300 million to one community. This is within a ward. So you can imagine how that community is receiving that kind of check size because of the mineral activity that has been happening in the area. Now, could we have done more? Yes, we attempted to do a lot more. In the year 2013, with the wisdom of the previous president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and the current president, William Ruto, they came up with the idea to actually segregate a particular ministry of mining. And that's when the focus came in. And with it, we started to really invite investors to come into the country. And then we came to discover we had a lot more potential than we were selling ourselves for. And one of those was also the big project that has been touted for years, the Mrima Hill project in Kwale, that is meant to be for rare earths, and it was valued at the time of almost $1 trillion. So
$1 trillion.
$1 trillion. So it was quite a big number, and
that's
of course,
more than 1,000 times the size of the Kenyan economy.
And it was a huge number, and with that came about the question. We had a small problem there. The issuing of licensing on that particular aspect became problematic, and the license was cancelled. We went into arbitration, but right now Kenya has the right, because Kenya won that particular case, and now we have the right to actually extract those minerals. Now, what has taken us so long and why we have not been able to do much more? One is that as a country, we did not invest much more on data acquisition.
Yeah.
We have been very slow on this, both on the mining side and also on the oil and gas side. We've been very dependent on foreigners to come and do this on our behalf. To remedy this, the government came up with a project called the Airborne Geophysical Survey. It was meant to be done by the Chinese, but the government felt it was better we do it on our own. And for the past 2 years, there was some activity done around the Airborne Geophysical Survey. However, in as much as that has been done, the results have not yet been released. And because of that, also Kenya went into a slowdown in terms of issuance of licenses. In 2019, licensing was frozen in the country.
2019?
2019.
That's about 3 years ago.
That's 3 years ago. So for the last 3 years, literally the only people, there are almost around 4 operators who are actually working with valid licenses in the country. Everyone else is left at the gate waiting for the moment to be able to be given the green light to carry out either further exploration on the areas of gold or any other minerals out there. And time is lapsing. Most of these licenses are coming to an end because licenses are issued between a period of 2 to 3 years. So literally most of these licenses will be expiring and nothing has been done about it. So this explains why there has been a lull from the moment when we were talking about this great renaissance that the country has a huge mineral potential, but nothing has happened for the last 5-6 years because there's been that stoppage of licensing in the country, little investment by the private sector and government in the sector. And the same case also happens to oil and gas, because the last time that we actually did a licensing round as a country was also equally that far back. And that means a lot more people have not had the chance to even carry out further exploration for even oil and gas in the shores of Kenya because we stopped much of that licensing. We are optimistic that this new administration will actually go ahead and actually issue out more licenses. But the more we issue licenses, the more we get investors coming in and telling us what we do have. And once we know what we have, then we can now either invest as a country or encourage the, other foreign investors to invest in the country. And then that creates economic activity that allows for job creation. And then we start getting the royalties and the taxes that now even enable us to spur our economy. Without that kind of activity, then the extractive sector will always be said to be a potential economic driver, but we are not reaping those rewards because we have not put in the right gear to move this sector forward.
I also want to hear from you, I mean, as a former CEO of Kenya Chamber of Mines, apart from what we know, the rare earth minerals in Kwale, the titanium, also in Kwale, we also have a coal in Mwingi Basin, and I remember there was a lot of controversy when a Chinese tried to mine that. We also reported to have gold in the western part of this country. What else do we know that we have?
Well, this is an interesting question. We have a lot of minerals as we stand right now. The reason being is that despite the fact that government has not been doing a lot of these activities, we have this, our Kenyan people are very, what do you call it, explorative by nature. And every day somebody comes across a new type of mineral, they take it to the labs in Madini Center here in Kenya, in Nairobi, and we discover that we have new types of minerals that are existent in our country. So there's been a new discovery of tantalum and tantalite, which is actually used as one of the battery minerals, okay, within the country, both in the area of Samburu and in Meru area. We've also had some few more discoveries of mineral sands up the coast of Tana River and Kilifi, which can add to the current find that we have in Kwale. There's a lot more gold in Turkana Basin.
In Turkana?
Yes, there's a lot of gold in Turkana, actually.
Did you know that, Mwedia?
Yes.
Well, I did know a place called Nakala Lake.
Yes.
People do go to prospect for gold.
So we do have significant amounts of gold. West Pokot has significant amounts of iron ore. It has also gemstones, rubies, very nice rubies that come out of West Pokot area and a place called Alale. There is also a significant amount of copper that we've discovered in areas of Migori.
Copper?
Yes, and also in Kitui area. So all of this is potentially available, and this is what we're finding on the surface. And most of these very highly potential minerals, you find them deep underground, but we need more of these particular studies. But as a country, indeed, we have a lot of potential, because to the north of us, we have highly rich mineralized countries such as South Sudan, Somalia, and all these others. To our south, we also have highly mineralized nations like Tanzania, which is that has gold and all these gemstones and diamonds. So we straddle along the same belt that moves across these countries. To our west, we have Uganda, which has also significant amounts of gold, iron, and other minerals, copper. So we are in that zone whereby we have a lot of potential, but what we have lacked to do as a country is to seize on this potential, put the people who like to look for these minerals, and this means the investors, all right, the Kenyan, local and international, to go out there and start looking seriously and hard till we find these particular minerals. And once we put them on the map, the government can now bring the parties together, issue the most appropriate licenses, and we unlock the kind of capital that will enable this country move in this extractive space.
Coming back to Mwedia, I mean, you said that there's a proposal on how to accelerate the oil exploration industry. What are these proposals that are before the government?
Now, there's a document called Field Development Plan, which, as I said earlier, it arises out of once you have carried out exploration and you discover some resources, especially in oil and gas, you then go to a second stage, which is called appraisal.
Yeah.
And the appraisal stage is somewhat an extension of exploration, and let me say an extension of successful exploration. Because you then come and say, okay, I found something here when I drilled, but how far does it extend? So you have some geophysical mapping that kind of shows how far it could be. But with these resources, you can never be sure until you drill and see that it is actually there. Everything else is only showing you possibilities. So in appraisal, you come and drill several wells around the field or the prospect that you had seen using your geophysical maps. And using that, you get to see what is the depth of the resource and what is the span in terms of width, so that you can start measuring in terms of volume. That in this area, I have maybe oil that extends, say, 100 meters within the ground. Never mind the depth. The depth could be 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, but it extends maybe within a span of 100 meters depth and maybe several kilometers width. And what is the concentration in each area? So using that, you can then measure what is the probable volume of that oil in that place, and how much of that volume can you extract? Because again, with oil, you never extract everything. In fact, you're lucky if you extract more than 50% of what is in place. So, and then you obviously didn't have only one field. Like you hear in Turkana, we talk about Gamia, we talk about Twiga, we talk about other places. I think there are about 10 of them which have been discovered and oil is found. Now, at the end of the appraisal, you have all this knowledge now. This is the much resource I have. This is the kind of reservoir that it is contained in, the depth and all those other technical details. You then go and sit back and develop a field development plan. It's almost like you're starting all over again, but now with all this information. So in the field development plan, what you are then designing in there is from the basics of now, how many production wells will I need to drill to produce this resource? how far do they need to be apart from each other? What kind of well do I want in terms of, there's something they call well completion, where once you have drilled the well, you go down to the bottom of the well and you equip it for production. So you're going to put, there are pumps which are called artificial lift. Can the crude flow on its own, or does it need to be lifted? So does it need some pumps? So what kind of pumps will I need? So there's a lot of that subsurface architecture that will need to be
designed.
And once you have done that, now you then have, you plan that I'll have the crude oil on the surface. How will it come out? The crude oil never comes out as crude oil only. It comes out with a lot of other accompaniments. For example, usually it will have a lot of water. It is not usually clean water for consumption. But other than that water, it has a lot of another array of chemicals which come together with it, and some SADs that come out with it. So now you have the other technical people to sit down and design, when all this comes out, how are we going to clean it? How are we going to process it? What kind of equipment do we need to set up now on the ground surface for us to be able to clean it, so that on the other end we have only pure crude oil coming out? And what are we going to do with all these waste that we have now cleaned? You'll have a lot of wastewater coming out, and sometimes there are waste gases, sometimes there are other types of chemicals that will be extracted out of this. So you have to design now this big facility, which is usually called the central processing facility, that will be built above the ground surface to do all this cleaning up. And sometimes you also have gas coming out of it. How much gas is it likely to be? What are we going to do with the gas? Are we going to store it? Can we use it for power generation to also supply electricity to the plant as we run the plant?
And this happens all over the world?
Yes, this happens all over the world.
This is a standard practice.
It takes a long period of time to actually do this.
And it's also, it must also be a very expenditure intense.
It is a very, very expensive. Even just developing this field development plan itself, you will go into hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars in terms of the kind of consultancies that you have to engage in to do this. And remember, if you have the crude oil in Turkana, you're still not done yet, because you have the clean crude oil now, but where do you take it?
So you need
to take it to the market, so you need a pipeline. What kind of pipeline do you need?
There are no roads, you have to build roads.
You have to build roads along the pipeline, because the pipeline, if you want the shortest route, it is not going to follow the way the roads were designed, you know. So you have to design the pipe. You hear like our pipeline will need to be heated because our crude oil is a bit waxy. It will solidify at normal temperature. So what kind of heating do you need? What kind of power line do you need to then construct to follow this pipeline so that it can supply the electricity? And when you get to the port, again, you need some storage facilities, because you're not going to have a ship waiting. You're going to have to build the stock.
So all that oil has to be stored, waiting for the ship to dock.
Exactly.
Before it is
you have to
loaded.
have enough for the ship, so that when the ship comes and docks, it receives what is there and fills up and leaves. Then the pipeline continues to bring more.
There was a time, we used to get a lot of updates on what's happening in Turkana. And there was what we used to call the early oil pilot. But somehow along the process, this whole died. This whole noise died. What is happening now if you go to Gamia 1 and 2?
If you go to Gamia 1 and 2 and Twiga and Amosing, there is absolutely nothing going on.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Everything is quiet.
Everything stops.
Yes, there are still some tanks which are there, and of course the well heads where the oil was found, and then you see the well pads where the rig came and stood and drilled for the oil. But at the moment, absolutely nothing is going on.
There are no people there.
There are no people working there. Perhaps
there are no
security
machines.
people. There are no machines, unless somebody left the equipment there hoping to come and use it one day later.
What happened? That's a very sad state of affairs.
That's what I was saying is good and bad, because usually you must have this break in any oil field. Of course, there are many places where you have oil fields at different stages. So even once this one has stopped to give way for the planning, then there's another one which is at a different stage, maybe of construction. So there's action going on. Unfortunately for us, we have only one project. We have 10 oil fields, but they are all contained in one development plan. So until this development plan is approved by government, and then the operators go and find the money and come and unlock the process, it is dead. It actually looks completely dead. So some people even still ask, is there really oil in Turkana?
That's a question that I always get from people. I always get questions like, was there oil really, or we were just being taken for a ride, or maybe the oil that was there was not commercially viable. But it's very interesting, you know, how you're explaining it, because it helps people to understand you know, what happens from point A to point B. But I want to go to Mwakesi. I mean, so what impact, I remember the former Minister for Mining suspended issuing of mining licenses to new players until an airborne survey was carried and concluded. I don't know how far we are, you know, in terms of concluding that process, but what damage has this done to this industry?
Well, O'Brien, the idea was noble. The idea to do the airborne survey was very noble. But I think being somebody who's worked both at the industry level and also served in government as an advisor, I can tell you that the idea of suspending issuance of licensing was not the smartest thing to do. Because you could carry out the survey without need to stopping the investors from going and still finding out what's available. These processes could have run concurrently. The problem that comes in is that the moment you stop issuing licenses, the investors or people who want to invest in mining, and usually these are usually foreigners because they have appetite to wait for long periods of time before they actually see a return on their investment. And that's why you'll find it's usually the British, the Canadians, the Australians, because they have that patience to wait for their money to grow. O'Brien, right now, if I told you to put 10 million in something that will give you money in 15 years, you'll tell me, Bwana, forget about those things. I want to do other things. But but the moment these people come into the country and then realize that they can't get a license, a simple thing as a license, not alone just even putting the money in to invest, they go elsewhere. So they'll go to Uganda, they'll go to Tanzania, they'll go to DRC. And this is what we lost out. And we spent a significant amount of time going to these foreign countries, telling them about the potential of Kenya as a mining destination. But because of suspension of the licensing, it froze that ability to do that. Now, just to quickly tell you, like oil and gas, mining also needs a lot of lead time in terms of exploration. You'll find even the Kwale project took about 10 years before it actually came into getting financing and moving into production. It took also another 3 years of building the mine before actually the first mining could take place around the year 2016, 2017. The first export was done in the year, I think, 2018, if I'm not wrong. So you can see it takes a lot of time. But the impact of it is such significant. Let me give you even a small example why we also need to move very quickly in terms of issuance of licenses. Now, in my area where I come from, Taita Taveta, we are actually it's the county with the largest block of gemstone mining. Yeah. But most of those licenses, the license owners are either dead or they have forgotten their businesses for a long time. So we have not issued new licensing in that particular area to new and enterprising people who would actually make better use of the areas that have gemstone potential as compared to others. Now, what this has done is that we have allowed a lot of illegal mining to go on. Some very dangerous forms of mining activities have been carried out. Yeah. We've been seeing cases in Migori area, for example, whereby because the country has not been issuing these artisanal mining licenses or mining permits to these smaller players, and be able also to go and find out whether they are carrying out their mining activities in a proper manner, we end up seeing people dying inside some of those vents and caves that they actually dig out. Yeah. So the lack of licensing by the government has a significant impact not only on the lives of Kenyans, but also on the ability of people to make a livelihood out of these minerals. And there are a lot of families, people who have gone to universities who are actually funded by the activities of somebody going underground to look for a gemstone or look for gold or look for which type of mineral so that they can be taken to school. So it's something that we need to really nurture and take care of. And the first step becomes to allow for the sector to actually get these licenses and actually carry out these activities. But the potential that comes out of it is significant. The impact on the livelihoods of people is also very highly significant. I think for mining, you can get more people out of poverty quicker than for us waiting for the oil to come and actually save this country. Because oil has a lot of geopolitical influences. Whatever happens in Russia, whatever happens in China, whatever happens in the US has an impact on the oil price. The impact on the oil price also determines whether people invest in the mining, in the oil and gas sector. And a country like ours, where we still need a significant amount of capital injection so that we can see that oil come to pass, you will find there will be no interest in a project like ours. But if we put some money more into the question of the mining sector, we might spur an economic renaissance for the people who are involved in some of these communities, and we can have a lot more people employed, and people will be grateful to a government that is actually considering a sector of the livelihood that can be well coordinated once we get back to it. So licensing, like it or not, has a significant impact on the sector. Once we get back to it, things will happen. Even in Mwedia's sector, oil and gas, the moment they begin to issue out and do the tendering for the oil and gas sector, you'll see a lot of white people coming in, putting in their bids, and we will see an activity coming up. So let's get back to licensing.
Is there anything that can be done to accelerate this process, honestly?
Well, if you call more of us to keep on saying these things on TV, I'm sure the right policy makers will get to hear about it.
Are there things that you are doing probably maybe behind the background,
yes,
you know, with government officials to ensure that this is done? Because, I mean, this kind of platforms, you know, are rare and in between. And so if you are to keep on waiting for these kind of opportunities, then a lot of water will pass under the bridge.
Yeah. I can speak on my sector. We've definitely done that. We've written to the cabinet secretary. I've personally also reached out to the ministry officials and the CS and also the administration, William Ruto, the president, to try and really get us back into licensing. And I believe they'll listen. The Committee for Environment and Natural Resources has also been very receptive, and we'll keep pushing, because the whole idea is that we want activity to become formalized, and we can be out there looking for more investment in the country, rather than sitting like the way we are sitting without any activity. That's why you find people like Mwakesi and everyone else are busy being asked to consult in different countries. People in Tanzania, in Zambia are calling us to give expertise. Yet this expertise can be better used right here at home, when we can have when money should be flowing in this country to enable this sector to grow.
Mwedia, I mean, when you just go to, you know, the northern part of this country, when you visit Gamia 1, Amosing, Gamia 2, and you see all these oil fields, you know, dead and quiet, without much activities, and when you remember about 5 years ago, you know, there used to be hundreds of people working there. I mean, how does that make you feel?
Well, it's obviously sad, because in fact the phase that was to come or is to come is the one that provides even much more prosperity. And perhaps I also need to point out that there has been delays, because the project that we are talking about was initially expected to start in 2019, and with delivering oil to the pipeline by some date in 2022. So this year, 2023, basically, we were expecting that oil will be getting produced. And in this development phase, it is when in the oil field, in the whole history of the oil field, it is during the development of the production facilities that most of the activities actually happens. Unlike in mining, where there is action throughout the mining process. There's so much activity, people involved, and equipment moving around, doing a lot of work. In oil and gas, you have quite a bit happening during exploration. Then when you come to develop for production, it goes up. quite significantly, several, tenfold, something like that. And within those about 3 to 5 years when this development is happening, that is when there is peak employment. For the people in business also, that is when there's peak involvement. Your services are required in great quantities. And then after, talk of financiers, talk of any kind of people, you'll find thousands of people working there. And then suddenly, when the export of the oil starts, it gets into a pipe, everything is mechanized, and a few people managing activity of what's going on. So it just goes down again. So when I see what is happening at the moment, I am seated there with hope. I would say with hope. It's sad that it is as quiet as it is, but hopeful that whatever is delaying it can actually end as soon as possible.
And what is delaying it?
Yeah, some of the things that caused the problem here are perhaps not our own making, because as you may know, the oil and gas internationally does go in cycles. And these cycles are almost like 7 years, 7 years, 7 years. So it's 7 years up, 7 years down. And what happens is when it is down, you'll find oil prices start to come up. When it is up, there's a lot of investment that happens, because the oil price is high. It is attracting a lot of investment at that time. So there are so many projects happening in the world chasing these high oil prices and also getting easy funding because the reward can be seen and the reward is high. And as this investment continues and starts getting into production, then the supply goes up. And when supply goes up, there is the usual rule of supply demand. And as soon as supply is higher than demand, the prices crash. This is what happened, starting 2015 and into a total crash in 2017. And when that crash happens, then the prices are low, capital stops to flow in, and investment stops. And I think our project got caught up now in such a state when now prices fell significantly. And I think internationally now you're trying to pitch for financing for your project. When the prices are at $30, $40 per barrel, your project doesn't look commercially viable when somebody runs the numbers.
And are we likely to go through the same cycle, for example, if we were to strike oil off the coast of Lamu?
Well, it will. It depends on what day you make your discovery. That's what happens. Of course, when you have the larger companies like the one working offshore Lamu, I know there's a company, the Italian company called ENI. When you have these larger companies which have a stronger financial muscle, even from within, they have ridden the cycles and they know how these cycles move, so that doesn't quite bother them. When it is their project, they will promote it when oil price is high and when the oil price is down. The problem is for smaller companies who have to go out there and look for money from the international markets. Then they struggle somewhat hard. So right now, the oil price is high again, despite all the hype and what is happening, or it's sounding like it's being battered by the energy transition and the move towards the clean energy. However, the price is high right now, and everybody who is in the oil industry knows that the need for oil is not going to drop dramatically at any time in the next 20, 30, 40 years. So they know that investment needs to go on. And so I believe that whatever we have, we'll have a chance for development.
I can see time is very well spent and must come to the end of this interview. But I not before I hear from Mwakesi. Mwakesi, look, I mean, around the world, environmentalists has been on the backs of mining companies, crying about, the environmental impact of mining, talking about, the damages to the layer, to the ozone layer, and so much. Is this somehow also affecting the activities around mining?
Yeah, I think we can say there have been some instances where in the country we've had some incidences where environment has been harmed by mining activities. But usually this is whereby when we find unscrupulous and illegal miners, they are usually the biggest danger to any mining activity globally. And for this, I think the thing is that we have a very robust law in Kenya for management of the environment, the NEMA Act. And on our part, we have also the Mining Act that regulates them. But I think what we need as a country is to have a synchrony between those two departments. The one that issues licenses for mining activities, so that the only person who can be found on the ground doing anything that is related to mining is somebody with a license. Yeah. And not only holding a license to mine, but also a license to ensure that their activities are carried out in such a manner that it does not harm the environment or does not pose a safety risk for both their workers and the community that surrounds them. And once mining activity is done, they carry out what we call reclamation activities, so that you return the land into a state that you, almost similar state that which you found, or even better. So that they are now involved in planting trees, enabling and making sure that the area is reclaimed in such a manner that it is viable. Now, the law we have right now has also recommended aspects such as putting up an insurance bond and guarantees, so that the moment you start your mining activities, we know 20 years from then that you can be able to come back down and show that you reclaimed the land. And if you're incapable of doing that, there's money that you put aside to carry out that reclamation that government can do. So these are the things that we hope that can be fulfilled, and we're hoping that with this Kenya Kwanza administration, it's not just enough to have the ministers and the cabinet ministers in place. It's now to get down to the grind of actually giving out licenses and enforcing the law. Because when you enforce the law, then activities of illegal miners and scrupulous activities are wiped away, and also people carrying out these activities are conscious that at the end of what I carry out to do right now, as much as I'm getting economic gain, I must leave the land better than I found it.
What is your message to the people at the State Department of Mining?
My message is that I think it's time to be bold. The Kenya Kwanza administration has been very clear that it wants a bottom-up approach to everything. So we must be bold. And it means being bold even in going out there and carrying out these, some decisions that might have been seen as difficult in the past. We need to carry them out. Let's start issuing licenses. And let's actually go out there and make sure that everything that is mined in this country is mined by a person who's legally meant to be doing it. We get rid of illegal activities, illegal exports of minerals. These dirty secret businesses should be gotten rid of without fear or favor. And once we capture that sector in a manner that we are able to regulate it formally and put things above board, it will begin to earn rewards for our people. And our people right now need to see money in their pockets. So the quicker we go about ensuring sectors such as this one of mining comes alive, the faster our people start to see the rewards, and they begin to acknowledge that they have an administration that actually cares about their well-being. So this is what I would call for.
Very good. Yeah. And to the people at the State Department of Petroleum?
Yeah, I would tell them that whereas a lot of places in the world, the upstream oil and gas sector seems to be run by the private sector, that the operators in those places are private sector business people. The state has a lot that it can do to stimulate activity in this sector. And I would give an example of Tanzania. Tanzania's gas project down in the south, Twara and offshore in that area, had almost died. And it had gone so badly to an extent where there is a Norwegian company called Statoil, which had written off its balance sheet some $970 million that it had spent in that area. And it had written off basically showing that we don't know whether this is ever going to move forward or not move forward. When President Suluhu Hassan came in and she took the seat of presidency, she decided I would like the Tanzania gas to be produced. And she called the parties together in government and asked them, what's the problem? And then from what she could understand is that the investors seem to have run away from us because we have been changing policy too drastically, and they are not happy with what to expect tomorrow. And so she instructed, like, let's get on the table with these people and let's have a discussion.
Yeah.
As we speak today, Tanzania's gas project is coming back on course. And it is a big project, a project that is likely to have an investment of up to $30 billion, not million.
$30 billion.
$30 billion.
That's about 3 trillion Kenya shillings.
Exactly, it's more than. It's a massive project.
Yeah.
If the government had not intervened, the private party who had already invested so much money in there may not have moved. And the same can be done here in Kenya. We are having a project that is 3-4 years delayed now, perhaps more delayed. And of course, there are challenges that are causing that delay. Maybe the people in the State Department of Petroleum need to think, if they're not already doing so, what can the government do to unlock whatever has slowed this thing down? Mm-hmm. It is going to bring a lot of investment into Kenya. It is going to lead to a lot of employment, and I'm sure the business people will also be happy.
Yep.
So what can the government do to get this project going? And you would be surprised that if the government starts getting very actively involved, things can come back on course very quickly.
Very good.
Yeah.
Asante sana, gentlemen, for your time and of course for sharing with us your insight. And we hope that the people in the two departments have heard, and of course we believe that they will move into action. Otherwise, asante sana.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's been about 2 hours of nothing but solid conversations here, but we're coming to the end. We started with the state of our economy, and now we are ending this show on a look at the extractive industry. You have heard it from the experts. They have been in this industry for a long time, and so they know a thing or two, and their advice is always solid, as it were. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you very much for being with us in the last 2 years. We encourage your company, because coming up next in the next 1 hour, before we go for the lunchtime news, is Kurunzi Mashinani. Here's our Swahili bulletin. So stay right here. Otherwise, from me and the business team, have yourself a good afternoon.